Clear to engage. Time on target. 5 mics. Out.
I can't go back to results.oregonvotes.gov except for to look at Measure 117. It's too depressing. So I'm hoping that you looked again. Since you have clients, you kind of have to look, right? I didn't have any that were in questions, so I figured maybe you loaded it back up and looked and see if there's anything new.
I think I hid underneath a rock when I was in Hawaii. Hey, nothing really new. I think that statewide stuff, nothing really changed. Nothing was out of whack or out of normal there. Definitely late ballots broke to the left, I would say, statewide as well as congressionally wide. So obviously, like even the Salinas-Erickson race in the federal side, like went, even a couple of more points towards Salinas. And then of course the Bynum LCD race, what I jotted down was that Bynum ended up with 47.52%. Lori had 45.16%. And 7.32% went to the other candidates that were in the. So that was clearly the winner was the other candidates who won it for Bynum, because neither one of them broke 50% or even got into that 48-49% threshold where I would say that they were clearly dominant. So, but 47.5 is right at my tipping point to where, because you look at like other candidates polling like 3 points or something like that. So if you get above 47, theoretically you should be able to overcome a third party challenger. So she did. I don't know. It's hard for me to say, would she have won if the Libertarian wasn't in the race, or the Green Party, or the Independent Party? It's so hard to say at this point, I'm just not sure.
Yep. I think I agree with you, and that's tough. I mean, it kind of goes to, it reminds me of the Drazen and Kotek and Johnson thing, where it's like both sides can say, oh, well, we would have got more votes for if Betsy wasn't in the race. And it's just hard to know. And ultimately, like, you don't get a chance to try that out. So you can always say, well, I would have won if this, but that doesn't win the race, unfortunately. But it looks like Lori Chavez-DeRemer might get a nice little consolation prize.
Yeah.
Possible labor secretary. And here's the thing that makes this interesting. I mean, people's names get bandied about for different things, but based on what I'm reading, and I'm going to try to find the link, but I believe it was Politico that reported that the Teamster president, Sean O'Brien, really wants her. And that's what matters. That's what's putting her in this conversation, because it's obviously going to be a Republican. But the fact that, she sponsored a union bill, she was like one of two Republicans to sponsor the PRO Act, which was a big union push that didn't end up passing. And the Teamster president, obviously, he came out and did a big thing by not endorsing the Democrat and publishing their polling that showed that Teamsters were going for Trump. And so I think Trump may want to reward that, and he'll reward that by giving them the Republican labor secretary they're going to pick in Chavez-DeRemer. And I think that helps her a lot, because the Pacific Northwest isn't a big anything. I mean, California is really the only prize out here in terms of electoral votes for Democrats. Oregon and Washington are kind of small. And so it's hard to justify why you'd have a labor secretary from a small state, except for the only pro-union Republican they can find that's like really in that spot. So I think it's real. I think a lot of people may want to dismiss it, but based on the people I'm talking to, it is a totally real possibility.
The only thing I would add to that is, if you're her, like, she probably really wants it, so she doesn't have to spend the next 2 years of everybody asking her if she's running for governor, Senate, or Congress again, right? It's just odd ad nauseum with that stuff. So
unfortunately, I think making her labor secretary actually makes those conversations worse, because now she's like a national figure and all that stuff. But I see your point.
It's an easy brush off, right? Like, I'm serving at the will of the president. I got time to worry about that stuff right now. So
she's gonna run in 2030 instead, when she's all done in the administration.
Yeah, it kind of lines up good there. Unless, JD Vance continues on and then she does a great job. And who knows, because we obviously are getting the vote of the Labor Party, just
Yeah.
not the leaders yet. So it's really just a matter of time. And maybe she's going to help push that agenda further. That'd be great.
Didn't expect to become a Labor Republican, but here we are.
I feel like I'm in labor. I don't know. Depends on what I'm doing. But in the state Senate, no real change. The three races we watched, which I thought was interesting. So Anderson wins by 6,000 votes. Gorsuch wins by about 6,000 votes, which I thought was interesting. And then Broadman won in Bend by 15,000 votes,
Ooh.
which is crazy to show how far that Bend area Senate seat. Tim Knoop won that seat by what, 1 point? You'd probably know the number.
1.5.
Yeah, 1.5%. 4 years ago, Broadman wins by 20. I mean, crazy. So, yeah, we'll go ahead and mark that one as kind of a solid blue seat now. I'm going to go ahead and make that note.
Here's the other thing about that one. You kind of look at these. All of these seats are required to have equal population, but they don't all have equal number of voters, right? So, like,
Yeah.
we're going to talk about House District 22. It has the fewest number of voters in the state, despite having the same population. So you look at the Coastal District, 78,000 total votes. Then
Yep.
you look at Gresham, 51,000 total votes, right? A huge difference. And then you go to Bend, 82,000 total votes. So it just shows you like the voting class, the people are just more likely voters. There's just it just goes based on education lines, right? A lot of times. So Bend, highly educated. The Coast kind of doing a little better than you'd expect, and Gresham actually the worst in terms of total turnout, which I think is super fascinating.
Yeah, the turnout in just that, actually we should probably give John some crap at DHM. He was a little off on his predictions there, so we did end up coming up short of past presidential years of turnout. But I mean, not horribly off to say that he was completely wrong. I think what we really saw was a lot of people drop their ballots in the mail sometime over that weekend, because the huge predominant amount of those ballots that hit through the mail, they counted or came in the drop box was literally that next day, Wednesday. And then there was like a trickle basically for the next, 4 or 5 days. So really
Exactly.
nothing else. I didn't see anything else in the Senate to really report. I mean, it was kind of at the end of the day, I think conventional wisdom is, we gave a shot at Gorsuch, gave a run there in Gresham. We thought it was a little closer. I think we can get into why we lost, but no big deal going there. House.
I think the main thing though is they did reinforce this seat in redistricting, and it obviously worked. I mean, they made it so it wouldn't be a 51-49 anymore. That was their main goal, and they did succeed at that.
Oh, that's good. That's a good point. Yeah, they pulled those East precincts out of Gresham and stuck those in Senator Bonham's seat, and then that became where Gorsuch could go a little bit, get those Portland seats. They haven't let out the precinct by precinct voter stuff. They have to certify it yet, and so I'll dive into it for the sake of beating my own head against the wall. But at some point, on the House, there was no real. Except we'll talk about the Kramer one. So let's leave House District 22 for the end. But a couple of notes I noticed is my biggest surprise in the House. I had two, but really the one that stood out the biggest was the fact that Michael Newgard lost to Vanessa Hartman in House District 40 by 4,500 votes. When this House seat 2 years ago, the Republican candidate lost only by 165.
Ugh.
That is hugely amazing. And I don't know if it is bad candidate, horrible consultant, Trump. I mean, I don't all that, because I don't know if it was all there's the weird part about it is we had the same consultant in this race 2 years ago. And then, we had a police officer, Adam Baker, 2 years ago. And then you have, a helicopter pilot. I have some more thoughts on that. I really think that 2 years. Well, we'll get into that later. But and then the other surprise I had, and then you can comment on my surprises, is Helfrich only winning by 1,300 votes in as the House Republican leader. I think that was surprisingly low for that district that he, won it going away 2 years ago. So you would think with a lot more name ID and a lot more presence out there in the world that he would have won. So I don't know if that was just him trying to be leader and not focusing on his race or what have you, as much as he did when he was just running to win it again. So, but I thought that was a surprise.
Who did Helfrich run against 2 years ago? I'm blanking on.
That was a lady out of the Dalles. It was city councilor. She wasn't well liked.
Yeah. Okay. I think, and you sort of brought this up last time. Sort of our problem is we didn't make any progress. In fact, we backslid, as you point out, on all of the key races that were close last time.
Mm-hmm.
And then some of these, obviously, the incumbents, we lost ground. And so the direction we're pointed going into a potential Trump midterm. Well, it will be a Trump midterm. The question is it going to be good or bad, right? The conventional wisdom says it's bad, except for, I was having this discussion at lunch today. We had a 2022 cycle that was pretty successful, despite the rest of the country doing worse. The Republicans in other states did worse in 2022. Then in 2024, they do great and we do bad. So we're sort of in this, like, I don't know what it is, opposite land now, where we only do well when Republicans nationally do poorly. Like I don't know if that's the new cycle, but right now I can count 2 cycles where that's true. So that's the thing where it's like, maybe because we're so blue and you're sort of protected from, this was my discussion, was the person I was talking to at lunch was like, well, maybe Republicans do a little bit better because in blue states, especially because your abortion rights aren't going to change. Most people think those are secure, your environment, and some of those other like top key issues. And so then down ballot, they'll vote for some Republicans, but it's only going to happen in like midterm years where the top of the ticket isn't up. So who knows? I think it's too early to know.
Minnesota, I would say, is considered blue like Oregon, and they flipped some House seats there. So I don't know. Right. But I just think there's a difference between a West Coast Democrat or a West Coast non-affiliated voter and kind of maybe a Midwest non-affiliated. I think some of the issue sets, and maybe we're a little stronger about abortion over here than they are over in Minnesota. Because I was watching some Minnesota stuff on YouTube, and they were running the same MAGA abortion stuff against the Republicans. So I just think it moves voters differently here than it does over there. And so you could be right. 2 other funny things of note before we talk about Kramer. Ben Edel, not a friend of the pod. He loses by 9,000 votes to, I consider to be the most unknown Democrat in the state legislature, Jules Walters. Good job, Ben. And then the other spin of that is Vicky, my wife, Reese Iverson, held her title again for the 3rd election in the row with the most Republican votes out of any House Republican. So screw you, Kevin Starrett, and those stuff. So it just goes to show you that, you can be, and she had an opponent. So it's not like she had no opponent. She had 2 primary opponents and a Democrat opponent, and she wiped the floor with all of them. So 29,001 votes. I think she's ballot chasing. I think we were just talking about she's going to pull the list. She wants to punch ballot that chase 950.
And then we'll get team vests made for the office, most votes. We'll just wear those around the Capitol.
That would be awesome. Great. We should do stickers and give them away to people.
Yeah.
And just like rep VBI, most votes, most Republican votes. And then we should actually make them for a couple of the Democrats too, which would be kind of fun.
Did any Democrat get that number too?
Yeah.
Like in their safe seats?
You know who gets the most is, I know this off the top of my head, and I'm trying to look, co-chair of Ways and Means.
Sanchez.
Representative Sanchez got more than Vicky, and one other person did in deep blue.
Wow, yeah.
Deep blue, just because there's so many Democrats, right? So
yeah.
But I think Sanchez got nearly 40,000 votes.
Was it Krupp?
No. She beat. Yeah. Ben
That's
just
right. Okay, good. Good.
So
I
we
mean,
want that. We should do a
sorry,
sticker for
Representative
most
Krebs.
Tim's and give it to Sanchez, and then most ours and give it to Vicky.
Can we get a sticker that says runner up and give it to whoever came in
We'll
second?
make
I
them
think that'd
little
be funny.
trophies.
That'd be awesome.
Give them trophies, and we give the runner up stickers. That would be pretty fun.
Oh man, that's awesome.
That
I
would be,
think overall the problem is we do not have any. There aren't any places. Just like Kamala Harris didn't improve on a single county that Joe Biden did. We did not improve in any races. So that is sort of a hard.
yeah,
It
no
just sets us up for another defense cycle in a lot of ways because when you go to recruit in these races, people are going to look at 22 and 24 and go, yee. And the
So,
Senate will be a little bit different, I
yeah,
think, because it's a different map every 2 years. That sort of shakes it up.
it does.
And there's some opportunities there, especially Southern Oregon. But the House is going to be interesting.
Well, and Anderson, I would say, he only won by about 3,000 votes 4 years ago, and then this one we won by 6,000 votes, so he kind of doubled
Yes, that's
right
true.
there.
That
I
great
would
point.
probably say that was the Senate Democrats probably saved themselves a bunch of money by trying to throw it after him because they wouldn't have affected the outcome there.
Right.
I guess we didn't mind throwing away money at Gorsuch in reverse, to be fair. But the polling was better on that one, and we always pulled ahead with Anderson.
Yeah.
There's never a point in which we were polling anywhere near margin of error. So
Right.
I think that's kind of the idea. So, all right, Kramer's race. Let's talk about that one real quick.
All right. So here's the thing. And I was talking with somebody, and this is the only way I can figure it out. I just don't believe it's too difficult in Oregon to try to manufacture a victory. Okay. So there's people out there, including Ben Eddle, saying this is cheating. I don't think it's cheating. Here's what I do think is that Bill Burgess, the Marion County clerk, does not count votes the same way most other clerks do. Okay. So most clerks, and I don't have any insider info, this is just my assumption. For ballots to break that hard late, it means that you're counting them regionally, not by the time they came in. So what they did was they counted a chunk of District 22, I think it is, that was Kramer positive, and for whatever reason ended up counting the parts that were more heavy for Munoz last. And so that means the late ballots are breaking harder for her, closing up the race. If he had just counted them in the normal, like, as they come in order, I think this race would have been tight on election night. But obviously it confuses people who don't like who and shouldn't have to, frankly, look into all of these small details. He should just do it the standard way and count it normally, and then people will be like, oh, that's a close race. But now it feeds into the narrative of stolen elections because it's slowly slipping away from us 3 weeks after the election, which is annoying. It would be nice if he just counted them the normal way. And so now the upshot is she's ahead by 123 votes. I might have missed an update, but it's over 100.
119
Okay.
right now. And I think that's final. Now they'll be chasing, right? So they'll update it as chase ballots come in. But and I think there was about 700 ballots that had, and when we say chase ballots, we're talking about ballots that had bad signatures, didn't sign it all together.
Yep.
Those ones are even the hardest because they have their name on it, so there is some ability to chase them down as far as what the clerk knows. And to just touch on your point about the clerk, I think you're so correct. Lane County does it similarly to Marion County, which drives me crazy that they just count whatever they got Tuesday night and they put out 2 updates and they'll say, well, see you next week. And now when we know the predominant amount of ballots that are dropped late Tuesday night or put in the mail over the weekend or what have you come in on that Wednesday, then it's kind of a small trickle. I feel like they should change because they haven't changed how they've done it forever, right? So maybe they should change it based on the rules so we have a little bit more definitive answers. Post maybe Thursday, they just pop in and do one more. Would it hurt them to put it out on Thursday after the election? Because to your point, I think we would have saw this early on and everybody would have been holding their breath. Because it feeds into the narrative. And if the whole point, if they say our elections are safe, transparent, and effective, well, I think they're safe. I don't feel anybody's in danger. Um, I don't think they're transparent enough. I think that's really where the problem is. And evil hides in darkness, all of the things, right? So if you put a spotlight on it, just like what Elon wants to do with Doge and all the things, the more you put a spotlight on it, the more easy, transparent the process is, the more people are going to agree with the outcome. And I think there should be, knowing that you get this huge kind of dump of ballots that happen Wednesday, Thursday, they should be required by law to put out another update that first week, because that's really when it all matters. And then if we know it's a close race, everybody's watching that for the next couple of weeks as they count those ballots as they trickle in. And that they broke hard left just really, really feeds in the narrative. And I would say that all the ballots that came in late, if you look at some of our hard right districts, they all kind of broke hard right. So I don't know. I mean, but that's not a hard left district. It's a purple district. So they shouldn't be breaking 80-20. I think is where everybody's really sitting there going, well, wait a minute. Why is it breaking 80-20 left? Right. When it didn't with the initial ballots, right? So that's where transparency matters, I think.
Totally.
That's kind of my take.
There's definitely more that the clerk's offices could do to kind of give people indications. But also, it's like, if you're the clerk and you're like, who are all these weirdos on Twitter? Like, I don't care about them. I'm just going to count the ballots. So, and I'm just going to count them the way I've counted them for 25 years and nobody cares. Like, but I think you do have to recognize that we're kind of in a different era in terms of these elections, in terms of how long it takes for close races, the fact that people all care about the close races. And it would be nice if they were a little bit more cognizant of that, for sure.
Yeah. Like, who cares if you wait to count Ed Deal's race? Like, it's clearly over. Like, or Paul Evans, or some of these other Marion County races that were clearly going to go one way or the other. But these ones that are going to be close, like, why? I don't know why that's hard to do. And I think the clerks are just stubborn. They can really be stubborn assholes sometimes. And I don't know Burgess from a hole in the wall, to be honest from you. So I don't know him on any level, but I just think it just seems very, well, maybe it's their one night where they get to be in charge.
I guess so. And this is the same thing. It happened in the Bulls race in 2020. It's just like a freaking nightmare to understand what Marion County was counting, when they'd counted it, how much they had left. Like, just put a little tabulator and say, ballots received total, ballots counted total, remaining to count total. Like, just anything.
Like, we got
anything.
Like the Coos County clerk, I mean, and she's a train wreck too, and she should be fired and replaced by the voters down there, because the response, like, all of a sudden people aren't getting their ballots. They're calling and complaining, and she goes, oh yeah, well, the post office didn't deliver our ballots. And we're like, well, why? I don't know. Go ask the post office. And we're like, you're the clerk. I mean, I remember Senator Brock Smith called her, and she gave him a whole pile of crap that we put out a press release going, where's the ballots? And we're like, but you're not doing anything, and you're the clerk. You should be hair on fire trying to figure out what happened to these ballots. And she just didn't care. She's like, we'll put out a press release and we'll tell people to call the county clerk, and they can come in and get a replacement ballot if they haven't gotten theirs yet. And we're like, thanks. So all the onus now is on the voter. So appreciate that. Yeah. Good job.
Frankly, I would go get a couple of voters from Coos County and file a lawsuit that she infringed on their right to vote, because she did. That's what happened. Yeah. That's what I would do. And same thing with these issues in counting in Clackamas, where they have apparently a tabulation machine that's new that they haven't set up, and then had a tabulation machine break down and cause slow. It's just like, get it together, guys. And, here's Tobias Reed. Maybe he can step in and give them some pointers. He obviously isn't in charge of the clerks, but he is supposed to kind of lead the direction for elections. And so maybe it's a good thing for him to work on.
He can go to the legislature
Yeah.
Secretary of State has the ability to write a bill that he asks the legislature to pass for them that says, I want standardized reporting, or I want standard, you know what I mean? Like, he doesn't have to tell them exactly how to do certain things, but we can have standardized reporting. And if those clerks can't figure it out, well, then too bad, figure it out. If not, quit, don't run again. Just like
I agree.
remember all the problems we had a couple of years ago and she lost her job. Well, apparently,
Yep.
apparently the next clerk sucks too. Can't figure out if a machine works.
Yes.
But that's the whole point of feeding into the narrative. If we're gonna, if you're not
Right.
gonna do things to help make things more transparent or to make it seem right, then let's get rid of it all and go back to in-person voting. And if you want to mail in ballot, you got to do it like they do in other states now, where it's hybrid style, where you actually have to request it and say, I want to vote by mail, and you have to request it, and then they say, okay, great, and they send you a ballot and you can vote by mail. But this idea that we're going to end vote by mail is stupid. It's never going to pass. I think we'd all would love it, I think, on some level, but I think that also I don't think our turn, Republicans believe if we just ended vote by mail, all of a sudden we would win all these races and we'd be Oklahoma. Like, that's not the case either. I mean, clearly there's more Democrats than Republicans in the state. So pull your head out of your ass, some of these people that think this way. And I think just like, let's just focus on the transparency. Let's focus on the stuff that we can actually affect, and maybe even Democrats want to affect, I think, to try to make it more transparent in the process, and that's all I can hope for in this stuff. Sadly, I think there's no way I'll circle back with the Kramer stuff. You've ballot chased before. I've ballot chased before. It's horrible. And you usually move 2 votes, 5 votes,
so
8 votes.
here's we in the very close primary I did and it's just a Republican primary. So the hard thing about that is you're looking at a list of Republicans going, well, how am I going to figure out if these guys voted for my candidate or the other Republican candidate? Now, what we did is we checked all of our lists for texting, for calls, for anything that we got that was an indicator saying they were voting for Ben. So that did get us a few people, including Ben's wife, who, funny enough, was on the challenge ballot list. We think that she voted for Ben. But so this is Ben Schmoller, by the way, in the House District 53 primary in 2016, 18. I can't remember.
I think 18. I think Ben
18
voted against Ben. That's my theory.
Maybe that you might not be. So we started 11 votes down, and at the end of ballot curing, we're 2 votes down.
Yeah.
And then they did the recount. So we moved the whole thing 9 votes.
Were you recount no matter what at 11? Would that have triggered recount?
It was still a recount. It was 18 votes was the cutoff. If it was 19 or 20, then there was no recount. Because there wasn't a ton of votes. It was like a couple thousand voters in that primary.
And make sure that you guys wanted to make sure there was a recount. And I feel like that's where the Kramer race should be at this point, is I think she needs to get to around 60, 65 votes to be down.
Yeah.
It's a little more doable. I mean, with the amount of resources I know they're throwing behind it, but so are the Democrats, right? And to your point, they're going to look at 700 ballots. First, now it's a little easier than a primary, right? So you're gonna say, well, are they D or R? That's your first thing. And then look at all of those and see how that breaks out. If it's 70-30 R over D, or actually wouldn't be that much. There's probably a lot of non-affiliated. And we find that most non-affiliated voters are the ones that screw up their ballots. That tends to be more the case too.
Yeah.
Your point, then you're like, well, crap, who's this person? So then you start looking at their precincts, or
you look at your data, see if you can match them to
is there
positive ID,
Republican, blended households, all that sort of stuff, and then you start contacting them, and but the reality is it's very, very difficult for you to get that person that lives in Woodburn or wherever to drive down to the county clerk's office and redo their ballot, right? Or re-verify their signature or what have you. Not the easiest thing to do in the world of ballot chasing. So I think I'd probably just say, too bad we lose Tracy Kramer and we slip back into the super minority to wrap up elections. I think that's really a bummer there. So she was an incredible candidate in 22, and I thought she ran a good race, and it just kind of followed the point of why we didn't do well in these other races. So she probably did better than these other candidates who in these races that were a lot closer, you know.
Yep.
So she's a great person. Her and her husband are great people. And I hope and she's young, and I hope this isn't the last we see of her. I hope that wink, wink, that she's ready to go for the next thing. That maybe it's county commissioner, maybe it's something else, you know. But Marion County's in it. Maybe it's county clerk. That'd be kind of fun too. But before I don't. Do you have any last wrap up things on elections?
Not particularly, no, except for I would default to saying, just based on historical evidence, that this midterm should be bad for us, but there's been a lot of evidence to the contrary, so nobody should write the book before it happens. A year, 2 years is just a lifetime in politics. There's no way to know what's going to happen. So go, if you want to run for office, go run for office, because you never know what's going to happen. And hopefully we can put together some successful efforts in the next 2 years, and maybe the Democrat supermajority will overplay their hand. I think that's the key thing, and we'll get into that in a future episode. But there's a lot of now Republican strategy that you have to decide. Are you going to try to make the bills, water them down, and help your constituents a little bit now? Or are you just going to say, look, you guys run the building. We're going to tell you what we think. But at the end of the day, you own all of this. Or even, are you going to try to bait them into making them worse? I mean, that's a strategy too. That's what the two caucus offices specifically are going to have to decide, is what's the strategy to get us back to more balance. Do we let them go crazy? Do we stand up and fight? And that there's no, I don't say there's necessarily a clear option. There's pros and cons to a lot of the strategies, and we'll go through them all as the big bills come through and as we're preparing for session. There's not a lot of tools available to a superminority, so that's you don't have a lot, so you kind of are at the mercy of whatever the Democrats do, and then try to turn it into some victories 2 years from now.
Yeah, all we got is about stalling and walkout, basically, and relationships. And
Yep.
the relationships is the key to the building. So, and we'll definitely get into policy. That's the fun part, is we get to turn our attention after this podcast and really kind of start focusing on the 25 session and policy and all of the things, that are happening. So I'm looking forward to that. And then we can show off our policy chops, Reagan.
I know how to write a bad bill, Brian. I can do that. That's easy to do.
Right? Let me show you how. Here's my thoughts on these, and maybe we'll dive into it a little bit more later, but I think really it's probably not going to change. And I'm probably just going to be cold-hearted on this one, but there's no unification at the leadership, the ORP, the national level, or the local level. So we saw no unification in regards to all that stuff. We didn't see RSLC coming into Oregon like they did 2 years ago. We didn't see the Senate R's working together with the House R's. I had to basically hammer the House R's into doing a walk deal with Raymond Love and Gresham and things like that to make it happen. So, and none of them showed up, but Vicky, Helfrich, and Bonham.
Mm-hmm.
So, Ed Deal showed up there too to walk. So, but that was it. So I think that's a problem when we had none of that. And I think that leads to very poor execution at the end of the day. And it leads to really, your message management becomes very poor from our level of things. And it basically bifurcates the messaging. So everybody's siloing their own messaging based on what they want to do and what they're going after. And a clear example with this was 2 years ago, every Senate R and House R candidate was pushing on the Democrats against crime. And that was really what it was very focused was, we were still getting hit with abortion. So that didn't change. So, because Roe v. Wade was before that, and you would think it was even hotter then than it was really this last cycle. So I think that's where some of that stuff as it filters down. But if your top isn't working together, you're losing that messaging, and then people aren't voting on those lines. And so, and I saw messages all over the place. And then I think the next thing is money. Without Congressman Greg Walden and his team and what they did, we would have lost even more. We would have lost probably 3 other House seats, and I don't, Anderson wouldn't have been affected because he didn't really give us anything. So the Senate would have changed, but I bet you would have saw maybe the House slide back into 23 territory. Who knows? I mean, maybe Javity pulls it out, I think, because he actually upped his vote goal a little bit. Who knows? But without Greg, it was clear. Last cycle, Tim and Vicky raised, I think, and I haven't done the final numbers yet, but 5 times as much as the leaders this cycle. So that's huge. And that's not including Greg's money. So just take that off the table. And Greg's donors. So I think that's really a problem there. And I don't know if that was a combination of, because we saw a lot of lobby dollars show up late in this race, in all of these races. We had Measure 118, and I know there was a lot of maybe corporate money and stuff like that that went to Measure 118. I wasn't in the caucus offices. All I know is I can just look at the totals. So that mattered to me. And then on the local party level, I would say, like Clackamas County, where went right of center last time, went left of center this time. And we had a lot of our House races, and we had 1 Senate race in their last cycle. And I think Marion County probably look at it as well. They all went left of center. And that really mattered. I think if that's the flood in from Portland people out to those rural areas that were Democrats and just vote Democrat. And also the local party, especially in Clackamas, they suck. They're horrible. They do not, that local party in Clackamas, particularly that one. And there's no Multnomah County Republican Party to speak of. So those areas in which we're trying to win, or we need to win these House races, there was 0 ground game. There was 0 people that are doing, the Lord's work, like you see in Deschutes County, Marion County, Lynn County. Some of these other, Coos County is a great party. Even Lincoln County, which is a blue county, there was a pretty good, strong Republican effort happening there. Lane County's got a pretty good Republican Party that does some work. I'm not going to go through all of them, but those 2 counties, one, Multnomah County, non-existent, and Clackamas County sucks. And then you talked about the off-year stuff, and we talked about that. I hope that's the thing. And then also, here's the last thing I got to say on this, and then I'll leave it. We get beat up more by our own than we do the other side of the ticket. The Ben Eddles of the world, the Kevin Sterritts of the world, the Robinsons down, and anybody from Grants Pass loves to beat up Republicans more and tell everybody out there that we suck than actually doing anything to help us. So, but they are there to ask for money. And I just think I'm just tired of it. I'm tired of constantly being beat up when I'm working 16, 17 hours a day, during election season. And you can ask anybody that knows me that I work until 9 and I'm up at 5. Like every single day, not Kamala Harris, like, 12, 13 hours, I was put in 16-hour days. And I know and I know Collada was doing the same, and I know his team. I mean, these guys that are working hard on these races, man. I mean, they're pouring the campaign managers that were working on these races. I saw some really good ones and I saw some really shitty ones. They know who they are, so I'm not going to call them out. But the consultants that I know that worked on these races worked their tail off. And I just hate it when these people just love to sit back on the other side of the fence that don't do shit to help us and just throw firebombs. And it's horrible and it's not helpful. So until we get that figured out and fixed, we're never going to win. It's just that's
to be clear. Republicans fight in primaries, but it should be limited to that window of making the argument about why you're the better candidate or why your opponent sucks. And what you're talking about is Republicans fighting each other, not in primaries.
Yeah.
Just like all day, every day about stuff that's like not. I get that people have disagreements about this stuff, but again, what's the point of arguing on the strategy of a walkout or whatever when we're in the superminority? Like, again, We have to figure out how to work together. And it's never going to be always my way, and it's never going to be always your way, and it's never going to always be whoever else's way. But like, it's team sport. We got to figure out how to play better as a team. Calm down, Rufus. My dog is barking like crazy, but anyway, so we have to figure out how to work together. And I think that's the most important thing that hopefully the super minority can teach us is how to work as a unit, fighting each other in a pretty negative environment and then come out of that stronger. I mean, I think this is like, I'm excited about this from the standpoint, just like national Democrats are excited about, well, we get to rebuild their party now. Trump beat them, so they have to figure out how to rebuild their party, find a new candidate, all that stuff. Same thing for us. We're in a rebuild. This is a rebuilding year. Hopefully we get some number 1 draft picks. Hopefully we got some good kids on the farm team. Hopefully we've got some new coaches that are really good, like all of that stuff. And so it's like, it's because sports analogies fit in politics really well, but it's like, that's where we're at now. We're in a rebuilding year, you guys. Stop trying to win the World Series. Let's try to put a good fundamentals crew out there. And then, we'll go get Shohei Ohtani for $650 million and the show ponies and whatnot.
We were so in a good example of the primary stuff, and I couldn't agree with you more on this. Like, I don't mind having primary battles and fighting them out. And then as soon as, and to an example, like, I did the Goodwin race down there in Grants Pass and Christine, the reason why everybody wanted Christine is because the Robinsons have done nothing to help us win red seats in Oregon. So people got behind Christine Goodwin and they said, hey, we know she's a team player. We know she's going to raise money and help us try to win seats against Democrats, because that's ultimately, if our number 1 goal is a majority, then you shouldn't be in politics. Like, if that's not your number 1 goal, is to get them, because you can't write policy until we're in the majority. You can play around the edges. So, and I remember at a debate with Christine and Robinson, and he said, no matter who wins, we have to win more seats in Oregon, and I'm committed to doing that. He did nothing to help us win seats in the Senate. And we're going to get nothing more of the same. And I think that's the part that really frustrates me, is don't just lie. And I mean, either show up and do something, or just kind of shut the hell up. But and guess what? If I have the opportunity to run another primary down there in 4 years, I'm going to do it. If I have a chance to remove people that aren't helping us win, because if you want to help us win, I'll disagree with you all day long on whether a policy stance this, because chances are we probably agree for the most part on about every single policy. We're probably on the same side of it. So it's just, you got to find a way to put that stuff aside. And Democrats do it too. They fight in primaries. They have crazy primaries too, but you don't hear about them still blowing each other up. In Oregon, at least in the general election, they're focused on one thing: beating us. And then that's what happens. So I don't know.
All right. Let's see. Couple of quick hits. I'm gonna link these. The Biden administration is appearing to approve a casino, an additional off-reservation casino, over the objections of Senators Wyden and Merkley and Governor Kotek, which is fascinating to me. And I did some digging on this, Brian, and we were kind of, we were sending out some texts, and it appears that Democrats, and this is the funny thing, this application was previously rejected by the Obama administration, or slow walked by the Obama administration. It continued under the Trump administration and got rejected in 2020, right as he was leaving. And then Biden has it restarted at the beginning of his term, and then it takes a couple of years, and then it gets approved, which is fascinating to me. So somehow it was blocked under Obama and Trump, but now approved under Biden. And I think what'll be interesting to see is how far do they get before the Trump administration takes over? Or does the Trump administration make a move to roll it back or not? And then sort of how does this expand the gambling landscape in Oregon now? There's an episode that I did while you were gone with Justin Martin. People should go back and listen to it. I'll link it. he sort of talked about that from the Cow Creek's perspective on this. Not the tribes are not unified, by the way, and he mentioned that. Um, the Grand Ronde, excuse me. I'm going to edit this out because it makes me look stupid. Justin represents Grand Ronde, but it's not their application. They're just sort of sticking with the governor's proposal in terms of only authorizing one tribe,
Yeah,
or
they have
one
a
casino on reservation.
they always have a dog in the fight, right? I mean, so it's fair to
Mm-hmm.
every tribe has, a dog in this fight. So I think it goes towards that way, that one casino per tribe kind of thing. So everybody has was it 9 tribes, right? 9.
I think that's right. But
Yeah,
not all of them have casinos. And I think there's 7 or 8 casinos. And basically it's an argument. It's two different arguments.
90%.
The one argument is sort of preserving status quo. The other one is more competition. And so right now the additional competition argument has won out in the Biden administration, and it appears to be setting off a firestorm of basically it's like a gambling arms race now where all these casinos now go, because here's the thing, I think people might be missing this. The tribes are federally recognized independent nations within the United States. So when they buy a piece of property, that property stops being Oregon property and starts being part of their tribal property, essentially.
Yeah.
And they can be dotted all over the place. It doesn't have to be contiguous. Like, not all those requirements exist. And so now, if Cow Creek or Grand Ronde or whoever all buy property, more prime property closer to urban centers, those stop being state lands where you can't build a casino on state land, but you can build it on federal tribal land. So that's the fascinating part of this. Does it hurt the lottery? Does it hurt other tribes? That's where we're gonna see the push come to shove. It's gonna take a few years, obviously, for people to go through more approvals and try to build these things, but it'll be interesting.
Well, and they, of course they want to build them, closer to where there's more people, right? I mean, that's just
Yeah.
it's
It's
retail
Yep.
marketing 101, right? I mean, Starbucks.
In Las Vegas, the casinos are not located in the middle of the desert. They're all in one spot on the
Yeah.
Las Vegas Strip.
Well, they've also found, which is kind of interesting, they found putting them together, they actually all do better, which is, there's some that have tried, moving them like North Strip, and they haven't done very well because it's way out over there and people like to be around other ones. I don't know. I don't know how many gamblers there really are in Oregon, all the details of it. I think we're gonna I think when you first started, it was the most interesting part is why is now the Biden administration. I know that, the Salem casino folks, I mean, they've had their application in for a long time. I know this stuff takes a while. If they both get approved, it will be very interesting to see what Governor Kotek does. If the feds approve both the Medford and the Salem casino, and then, because if she says yes to those two, it makes those two tribes happy, and it's going to make the Grand Ronde and some of the other ones super pissed. So, and I think that could set off some negative approaches to things. And I don't know where the public's at on casinos. I don't know if they really even pay attention. I know they know they're Indian casinos. I don't necessarily know if they care that they have to drive to like a Grand Ronde, or now I think they lost a lot of their business with the Washington casino that moved in up there by the center, was just closer to Portland. So, but I think even the Grand Ronde tribe owns the old Greyhound dog tracks.
Mm-hmm.
So to that whole point, like you said, like, oh, great, you approve Salem. Now all of a sudden they go, oh yeah, you remember that Greyhound track right there in the population center? Well, bam, we want one. And I don't think that necessarily is what is good for Oregon. I think that Vegas and Trump, and you and I were trying to figure this out earlier, like where does Trump stand on Indian casinos? Because they are rushing this through because they're afraid Trump will deny him. And my theory is I think he likes casinos being in Vegas, and he likes people going to Vegas, and maybe a Republican administration looks more at the traditional Atlantic City, Vegas kind of stuff, and wanting to keep it there instead of maybe just proliferation of casinos in general across states. So I don't know if I don't think there's any sort of family value scenario or against gambling or anything like that. Because I feel like now you can bet for sport. You can bet on sports games like anywhere on your phone all the time. I mean, that's everywhere. I mean, you can bet on anything. You can bet on the presidential race. So because
Maybe Trump tries to builds a hotel in Portland, which he'll never get because everybody in Portland will immediately try to stop him from building a Trump hotel. Like that would actually be really funny to see him try to buy property in Portland and then they try to stop him from building a hotel. And then he centralizes all the casinos and reinvigorates Portland with his
yeah,
Trump Tower in Portland, his Northwest Trump Tower, which would probably get graffitied every single day, would be my guess. And then all these new
I think
casinos.
that was if you go to DC, like you can go to like Baltimore, right? Or Maryland, you just go right across the Potomac there and you can get there. They got casinos
Yep.
like right there, on the Potomac, 15 minutes from downtown DC. And they're nice. They're nice casinos. They're all the things that these Indian casinos have in the West. Everything on the East Coast always seems closer. And then on the West Coast, everything seems farther away. And our land is more. And I think I think these casinos, I don't blame them for wanting to find ways to better their tribe, which is that's their job, right? To get them closer to population centers. So they're just saying, well, if we were just 20 minutes closer or 50 minutes closer, or whatever it is, we're going to do better. And then we can provide more for our tribal organization. So they're doing right by their organization, but what is it right for Oregon or not? Tough call.
All right. There's a lot of news about leadership. I think these are bigger conversations. I want to save that. So what I want to do is we're coming to the close of a legislative session and there's some people that are not returning. So before we get to the turnover, Bryan, we've had this idea for a little while and mentioned it. Listen, it's a 90-person legislature. Who's going to remember all 90 names? Not me, not you, not most people. There's a few names that I think get thrown out there and everybody knows, and we'll take the heat, everybody. We'll take the heat for the people that are a bit forgettable sometimes, that you kind of just forget. Oh yeah, they're in the legislature. It's nothing against them. It's just, sometimes it's good. There's all these videos of Nancy Mace being a little over the top about the bathroom issue in the Congress. I'm just gonna be honest. I'm totally opposed to men using women's bathrooms, but it's getting really silly right now, the kinds of videos they're clipping. So in this social media age, you have to do a lot to stand out. And there's some people that are just not making that effort to stand out. They're happy where they're at. They're not making it. So they get forgotten. Bryan, you said top 5. I'm gonna have some trouble with 5, I think. I think I can do.
I think I ended up with 6, but I got a tie. So I think
Okay. Okay. So I want you, as I'm finishing up my list, to read your list of most forgettable legislation. Is this House and Senate, or is this? Here's the thing. We work in the Senate. There's not very many of them, so I remember all of them.
it's. I guess maybe it's a little, and there's half as many, right, to remember. But I think senators tend to be a little bit more boisterous, so therefore they tend to do more floor speeches and stuff like that. But I had 2 in the Senate. I'm gonna put one from the House, or one from the R's and one from the D's that I would say are pretty forgettable, right? So, and the Democrat I would say is Senator Woods. I think that, and he had some health issues, so I'm probably going to give him a little bit of a pass there. But I would just say he's kind of, you don't really think of him when you say, tell me a Senate D. The one on the Republican side, I will say, is got to be Art Robinson. I mean, the only reason why you would know him is because he would stand up with his pre-prepared speech that I'm sure one of his sons wrote for him, and he would read it. And then you would never hear from him the rest of the time on the floor. And that was, so those are my 2 in the Senate. Everybody else in there, I think, is kind of carved out a niche. So on the House, this was the fun part, because we did have a lot of turnover in the House, in 22. So this is a 23-24 cycle. So we'll have to have a new list coming out. So
very exciting stuff.
I put tied at number 5. I put Dwayne Younger and Nancy Nathanson. So as just you just don't really. Nathanson's been around, but she never really speaks on the floor. You don't really hear from her. I think Yunker is. I didn't really see anything in there that made me, what's his niche? I don't even know. And then I would go to number 4, Zach Hudson on the Democrat side, because I think that
Okay.
you take campaigns out of it, because we always seem to go after Zach.
Yeah.
But take
Totally
campaigns
forgotten.
and think legislatively, he's kind of just nowhere. And then Brian Stout, I put it number 3 on the Republican side. Literally pulled off committees, obviously had a lot of personal issues going on, but he never really spoke on the floor either. So he's just kind of was non-existent, probably partly self-determined. But
I think basically what he was hoping was that the judge would lift the restraining order and then he'd get his committees back, and that didn't happen. And so basically it was like, whoops.
Yeah. Number 2, I have down as Rep. Wynn. Now, which
win?
Of course, now
I have a win on my list.
Instead of the $1.3 million or $1.4 million that she spent on her reelection, you wouldn't even have known that while Wynn was running. Look, and I said her name right too. She should tell me thank you, or I'll say I'm sorry for saying her name wrong before, because I hate it when people spell my name wrong. But while Wynn, with her $1.4 million, now should be recognizable, I would imagine, in the House. But really, prior to this election, you didn't even know she was there. And then my number 1 is Jules Walters. Which is the only the only thing that I know her for. Otherwise, I wouldn't even have known she was there.
And that's the one, because that seat was 37 was always Julie Parrish's seat for like so long.
Yeah.
And so I always forget that somebody replaced her, because Julie's still in the legislature. She's working in the legislature for Senator Hayden. And so you just kind of forget, like, oh yeah, there's somebody else in that seat.
Yeah.
Because Julie is much more of a personality, whereas Jules not very much, except for her brief internet fame. So that helped a little bit, not in a positive way, but it is what it is. So I was able to come up with 4. So my 4th most forgettable is Daniel Nguyen, and the reason is because Hua is so big on the election side, Daniel just kind of gets put to the side a little bit. I think he's more of a factor in the legislature side though, but this is just like in terms of my ability to remember them.
Sure.
And you would think that because they both have the same name, I would remember that, and it's just not true at all. Second one, or my 3rd most forgettable, is Thuy Tran. She's a very, very kind person. I don't remember her being particularly. She's not a very tall person, and so she just kind of gets lost in the shuffle of things that are happening. And we worked with her on a bill.
Short people, Reagan. You know who your boss is now.
I know. And it's not meant to be a slight. It's just it's a height. It's my heightism. I need to fix my heightist self. I'm medium regular height. I'm actually the literal average for men at 5'10", 5'9.5", whatever. The half matters.
Yeah, right. It sure
Second, and here's the thing: she won't be forgettable, I don't think, in this next session, but the last 5 or like 3 or 5 sessions, Susan McLean. Always forget about Susan McLean, but if she ends up still being the co-chair of transportation, she's just gonna be in the front and center for the session. Yeah. So that'll solve the problem. And then my number 1 is also Jules Walters, and always was. And if anybody ever asked me, or like, who's the one you forget the most, it's Jules Walters, 100%. We'll remember her because she's now our most forgettable. But it's very exciting. Like fun to see the turnover. In the sense that it's breathes new life in the legislature, new characters come into the building, new alliances and oppositions are formed and all that stuff. So 25 session
Republicans. I mean, look at you, went with all these.
I'm a little bit better at remembering the public. And Yunker I can't do because I always see his tweets, so he's always in front of me because he's a very prolific tweeter. I think if let's see, if I had to pick a
I don't follow him
Republican.
on Twitter.
Oh, here's my most forgettable Republican because he forgot he was Republican. It's Charlie Conrad. He went independent, made himself super irrelevant after his primary loss, big primary loss. Just took his ball and he didn't go home. He popped it. He took his ball and popped it, and just made himself as irrelevant as possible by leaving his party and throwing a fit about it. So anyway, there you go. There's my bipartisan Republican
Only
one.
one I agree with all three of those, except for Vicky and I tend to run in McLean, and
Yeah,
she goes to the same restaurant we do on Monday nights when we're in session, so we kind of run into her there. So that's why
you
uh,
have a regular Monday night restaurant, Brian. You're such an old person.
it's not even funny. Yeah, right. I mean, it's just Salem. There's only so many you can go to, and there's only so
It's
many
true.
open on Monday night.
That is just such a problem.
Yeah, but I think but you're right. She's going to be well known if she's still co-chair transportation, because that's going to be a big issue, and we're going to.
It's been her and Gorsuch, and so are they the guys that are going to get trusted to lead this thing through? I don't see any reason they wouldn't be because they've been in this conversation for so long. It would really be cutting off your head to replace them, I think. But who knows?
See, they
People are going to jockey.
Well, let's just, last and least, maybe just announce the leadership stuff. And I do want to talk about it further, but I don't know, maybe there's some people that haven't,
Yep.
people who listen to our show got to know who the leaders are. I mean, if they don't, then they're probably hiding underneath a rock. So I don't even know if it really matters, but I think having, Christine Drazen come back as House Republican leader 3 years later is pretty interesting. Seeing Jeff quit after that, and the press releases that came out with it were odd to me, but is what it is. I mean, it's a hard
Most people I talked to said, "Why would you write that stuff down?"
Well, and we
So
had
really,
that with the memo stuff over the summer. I mean, all the things, right? But I'm not going to really trash anybody who takes on leadership within a caucus, because it is a shit hard job. And it's very difficult to corral your members, try to get more members, and then also negotiate with the other side. So whether you're a D or an R, I think it's a very difficult job. It's thankless. You don't get paid more. Wait, unless you're the majority leader or the speaker. Presiding
only the presiding officers.
Presiding officer. Sorry,
the majority leaders don't make more either.
But I think those are tough jobs, and I think it's really tough, and they don't get paid much more. They get, I think, double, right? The presiding officers, the two, which means they go from 2,600 to 5,200 a month. So for people out there keeping score, that's what they get paid, and it's way more than a full-time job. So I think that people don't realize, unless you've actually been a leader or worked for a leader, you don't realize the 24/7 job that is. And like all of us now are taking a breath and going on vacation and doing the things after elections and gearing up for session, and maybe a slower pace. The leaders they're pounding it, man. They got to figure out committee assignments. They got to do all the things. And it's a tough job. And so it looks like House D's just put out theirs elections.
Yeah.
And it's the same. Was there anything that changed there?
I'll just read them off really quick. Speaker nominee Julie Fahey, Majority Leader Ben Bowman, Speaker Pro Tem, and this is a good pick by them, by the way. Usually it's your longest tenured member, but in the Senate, that hasn't always been true. It's David Gomberg. He's replacing Paul Hovey, who's leaving. So that was a change. Majority Whip, Andrea Valderrama, Portland Deputy Majority Whip Jason Krupp. Assistant Majority Leader Pam Marsh for policy, Assistant Majority Leader Anissa Hartman, politics, and then Assistant Majority Leader for professional development, Hi Fam. So kind of interesting how they structured them.
Yeah, I thought that was pretty good, actually, how they did that. And we should say, so the deputy for the Republicans on the House side is Representative Lucinda Elmer. Sophomore out of McMinnville. So that's a new one. That's our first time in leadership. So that should be interesting. And then the whip is Virgil Osborne out of Roseburg. So I think that is also a new position for him. And he's a sophomore. So we're kind of seeing some of the newer ones come in with an older leader, not older in age. Sorry, Christine, just another leader. So, and then we have two new fresh faces in leadership on the House R side. So that could be interesting. Senate R's, same. So Leader
Nice.
Bonham, deputy leaders are Dick Anderson and David Bruck-Smith. So,
And Hayden.
and then Weber, sorry, Cedric Hayden, and the whip is Susan Weber. And
And I
then
think part of that is Bonham, Hayden, and Weber can't come back. So I think part of it, my guess is the caucus is just like, yeah, you guys go for it. You've only got 2 years left. You might as well, do it how you want to. And some people ask me why we have so many deputy leaders, and the reason is under Leader Knopp, he said anybody who wants to help out and be in leadership, I want them in. And these were basically the names that all stepped forward. And so they made them all deputy leaders and the whip. So that's why it is like that, in case anyone's curious. A little insider info.
yeah, and then the Senate Dems had a little bit of a shakeup from what we heard. So everybody kind of knows that we had. Go ahead, Reagan. You know more about it than me.
All right. So, and this was interesting because Taylor was the majority leader. And the weird thing about this one is she won all of the races that she was supposed to win, did a pretty good job fundraising, and Democrats still replaced her. There's more to come on this, but they replaced her with Casey Jama, who's a bit of a surprise. Most people weren't expecting him to run for leadership. So we'll see. There's probably more to be talked about there. And then Senator Campos is the deputy majority leader. Assistant majority leader, a new title. Nobody else has an assistant majority leader. Senator Solomon, another assistant majority leader, Con Pham, who's brand new to the Senate. Then we also have Rob Wagner as the Senate president designate and pro tem designate Senator Manning. And he's the one, he hasn't served longer. They picked Manning because they liked him. I think the longest serving senator is Floyd Przansky currently. And then they have whips Gelser-Bluen and Frederick.
Is he the longest serving senator, period, both sides of the aisle? I think so, right?
I believe that to be true. Yes.
And,
Courtney was the one before him, and now that Courtney's left, Przansky's the longest.
and on the House, it's Greg Smith, right?
Correct.
I think he would be number one. So there you have it. Well, yeah, more to come on leadership. We'll kind of talk about that as we see, especially we'll probably do something when we talk about leadership and committee assignments and stuff, because that's probably the next thing, right?
Committee assignments, man, that's Christmas for legislative stuff. Everybody opens it up and they either get excited they got the chair for the committee they want, or they get a big basket of coal and some garbage committee assignments. So it'll be fun to and here's the thing, we will not hold back. We are going to call out the bad committee assignments. If you listen, I'm just going to tell you this. Your Senate president or your speaker does not like you if they appoint you to the Joint IT Committee. That is a hated committee assignment. It's one of the worst possible ones. They don't meet very often, but frankly, let me tell you, unless you have IT background, they hate you. That is what that says. It's true. Tell me it's wrong, Brian. Tell me I'm wrong.
I mean, that was definitely one of the worst committee assignment that I think Vicky ever got at one point, and they did literally, I mean, next to nothing. Was the House. It was like the future House on, oh, I forget what it was. It was like revitalizing or reimagining the House or something like that.
Yes.
And Janelle was the chair, and it was just all they did of any substance was that they at least got a new voting machine over in the House. But I mean, but it was like at night. It was like a 7 p.m. committee hearing, and it was. I just remember Vicky just going, "Oh my gosh, what is this?" And there was some good ideas, I think, in there, but like nothing came out of it, right? It just except for a new machine, which they wanted anyways. But yeah, there's a few bad ones out there that are just, and they're not bad, they're just clunkers, right? They just like, I really have to serve on that one. So
everybody thinks Joint Measure 110 was an exciting committee. That was a Wednesday night and Monday night committee. That's a bad slot. Nobody likes that.
Brutal committee. I mean, talking to a few people that were on that committee, yeah, you're in the middle of it, but it was brutal.
Yeah.
The amount of hours they put on that committee, just sitting there hearing testimony and all the things. So that is brutal.
All right, Brian, we did it once again. We've podcasted and we've told the people the truth. Not always great. It's going to be a few months of this, guys, for the Republicans anyway. Democrats, I hope they're listening and just enjoying themselves while they console themselves with federal news. Breaking news, Matt Gaetz has withdrawn as the attorney general, and Trump has nominated another Florida former AG, Pam Bondi. So I'm interested to see if this is part of a deal between DeSantis, because I think she's a DeSantis ally, former DeSantis ally potentially. So I wonder if this is part of the Senate seat situation that's happening there with Rubio or what. So it'll be interesting to see what happens with that.
Breaking news.
Breaking news.
Oh, another breaking news. It's called modernizing the people's legislature.
Modern.
That already told me.
Right. Yeah. See, I would have so many good ideas for that. Like, hey, why do we? This is my last thing. The lobbyists and the state agencies all have bill tracker software. And in the legislature, we have to use measure tracker, which sucks and isn't automatic and doesn't send you notifications about anything. And frankly, I think that's wrong. It's wrong that the lobbyists and the state agencies have better tracking software than the people and their legislature. Yes. And if I had thought about that when I was in the leadership office, I would have banged on that a lot and told them to fix it when we were in meetings with Rayfield and Wagner and what's their faces. But now I'm not in those meetings, so somebody else has to work on that.
And the state of Oregon and good software did not go hand in hand.
No, the state agencies buy it from like basically the lobbyist groups. It's very funny.
I think they buy it on the discount store from somebody else that's throwing away their crap. Because I think it was so bad, like the voting machine stuff was so old. And I think Tim Sakarik said this story, like he literally, like the last legislature that was using it, they bought all the parts from their machine so they could keep it going. Like we ran it that far to the ground.
Ooh.
Pretty
rough.
Yeah. So glad that they finally got a new voting machine there. So that worked out okay. All right, let's get out of here. Everybody,
election month.
Talk to you.
Almost over, guys.